Hello and welcome to Arcs and Orcs with Sasha Wallace. This is going to be part 3A of our anti-trafficking lecture mini-series that is currently streaming on the Arcs and Orcs podcast for a follow-up to the news story that we reported on in part 3 on the 7th of February 2025, which was the very disturbing atrocities that took place in Goma in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa, where hundreds of women were raped and butchered and then burned alive in the female ward of the prison at Munzenze in Goma during and following a mass jailbreak of 4,000 plus male inmates as the M23 rebel group and other potential forces stormed into the city of Goma to take it over, and there were clashes with the Congolese army and Congolese military and air force. And after reporting on that, which I did on the 7th of February, as you'll see in part 3, there was a call by the United Nations peacekeeping humanitarian forces to convene a special session of the UN Council in Geneva, for which they must have a court agreement of at least a third of the member countries. There are 47 member countries of the UN Special Council, and they received that court agreement from 27 of those member countries, and I wanted to follow up following that special session that took place on the 7th itself and find out what happened. And so I'm going to read to you 3 different reports that have come out of the UN on the news.un.org website, their online news reporting hub, to find out what has happened since. And I've found 3 important follow-up stories. So just like in part 3, I reported on 3 different online newsrooms, the Daily Mail, the Hindustan Times and the Guardian Online, to capture as much of a rounded understanding of what was happening on the ground in Goma. And now I'm going to give you 3 stories, all coming out of the United Nations. The first one on the 5th of February, the second on the 6th of February, and the third on the 7th of February at that very special council meeting that was convened to call an international humanitarian crisis into the spotlight and see what can be done to support the terrible conflict going on in Goma and neighbouring cities and villages that border with Rwanda in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, thank you very much for listening to the Arcs and Orcs podcast. You can find all the episodes in the anti-trafficking lecture mini-series at patreon.com/The Hero's Journey MC. That's The Hero's Journey MC. Thank you very much. And without further ado, we will dive in to the first report on the United Nations website, news website, which is news.un.org. So the first one, 5th of February, the DR Congo. UN mission offers protection to vulnerable populations despite huge challenges. Rwanda-backed M23 rebels continue to consolidate their hold over North Kivu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, on Wednesday, despite declaring a ceasefire 2 days earlier and pledging not to continue south, according to the UN's Deputy Special Representative for Protection and Operations in the country. Vivian van der Peer briefed from the ground in Goma, the regional capital, telling journalists that the situation is still highly volatile, with persistent risks of escalation, emphasizing that military action alone will not resolve the conflict. The hostilities are occurring in a mineral-rich region that has been unstable for decades amid a proliferation of armed groups, which has forced hundreds of thousands to flee their homes over the years and seek safety in displacement camps. Fighting escalated sharply in late January 2025 as the largely Tutsi M23 fighters seized control of parts of North Kivu, including areas near Goma, and advanced towards South Kivu and the eastern DRC's second city of Bukavu. She warned that the peacekeeping mission, named MONUSCO, where she serves as deputy head, was operating in an increasingly challenging environment. The mission's key infrastructures in Goma are overwhelmed, with both UN personnel and Congolese seeking shelter within our premises, said Ms. van der Peer. Pressure on space is growing. Some 2,000 people are on site, and on critical resources like water, food, and sanitation. MONUSCO has confirmed that Goma Airport continues to be under M23 control after their takeover last week and has suffered significant damage, including to the control tower. UN personnel have been denied access to the site, which is a crucial entry point for humanitarian aid, limiting their ability to assess the full extent of the destruction. She said the mission was gravely concerned over Kavumu Airport and the potential it could be taken by rebel forces. Losing both airports in the midst of an ongoing humanitarian and IDP crisis will be untenable for the population of the region. Although some water and electricity services have been partially restored in the city of Goma, much more is needed to ensure that people have access to adequate services. The World Health Organization, the WHO, now warns of potential disease outbreaks as bodies continue to be recovered across the city. Over 2,000 bodies have already been buried, while 900 remain in morgues, fueling fears of a potential epidemic. Political and regional dimensions. While the UN continues to advocate for dialogue, peace efforts remain stalled. The Luanda and Nairobi processes, the two main diplomatic initiatives aimed at resolving the conflict, have yet to yield tangible results. Meanwhile, the African Union summit scheduled for later this month is seen as a crucial opportunity to reinvigorate regional engagement. Ms. van der Peer also confirmed the presence of Rwandan forces in eastern DR Congo, despite denials from Kigali. The UN has restricted movement, limiting verification capabilities, she said, but multiple reports have cited Rwandan military involvement alongside M23. An uncertain future for MONUSCO. Amid mounting insecurity, MONUSCO has ceased joint operations with Congolese armed forces, the FARDC, and withdrawn from South Kivu following Security Council mandates. The mission now awaits further instructions, with discussions on the next steps expected in the coming days. Ms. van der Peer explained that the mission needs clear guidance from the Security Council as the fluid situation is changing literally every hour. Aid operations threatened. In addition to escalating violence, the US government's decision to halt US aid funding for certain humanitarian programs is expected to cripple UN relief efforts. The International Organization for Migration, or the IOM, and other key UN agencies are already affected by stop work orders, compounding the crisis. Meanwhile, reports indicate that M23 has instructed NGOs to halt operations in areas under its control, further limiting humanitarian access. A plea for peace. We reiterate our call for the urgent reopening of Goma Airport, as we need to evacuate wounded people and bring in humanitarian supplies and staff in, said Mr. Dujarric. As MONUSCO continues its efforts to protect civilians, de-escalate hostilities, and facilitate humanitarian access, Ms. van der Peer underscored the urgent need for a political solution. The people of the DRC deserve peace, security, and stability, she said, calling on all parties to put an end to hostilities, prioritize dialogue, and work towards a peaceful resolution. That is the end of the first article, published on the 5th of February 2025. We're now going to jump to the next report on the UN News Hub, which is news.un.org. I will be publishing these links in the description box on Patreon and on Spotify. This report comes as Antonio Guterres appeals for mediation to end the crisis in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Published on the 6th of February 2025. Now is the time to end the crisis in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, the UN Secretary-General said on Thursday in a briefing to journalists in New York. Antonio Guterres made the special appeal for peace ahead of two major meetings to address the Rwandan-backed M23 rebel group's brutal offensive across the region. We are at a pivotal moment and it is time to rally together for peace, he said, speaking from the Security Council's stakeout position. We need the active and constructive role of all the players, namely neighbouring countries, sub-regional organisations, the African Union and the United Nations. Thousands killed and displaced. Eastern DRC is rich in minerals and other natural resources and has been plagued by conflict for decades. More than 100 armed groups reportedly operate in the area. Fighting between the M23 and Congolese government forces escalated in January, with the rebels capturing the regional capital, Goma, before heading south towards the key city of Bukavu, capital of South Kivu Province. Thousands of people have been killed, including women and children, and hundreds of thousands have been forced from their homes. We also see the continued threat by other armed groups, either Congolese or foreign, said Mr. Guterres. All of this is having an enormous human toll. Countless violations and abuses. He highlighted the countless reports of human rights abuses, including sexual and gender-based violence, forced recruitment, and the disruption of life-saving aid. The humanitarian situation in and around Goma is perilous, he said. Hundreds of thousands are now on the move, with many of the previous sites hosting displaced people north of the city now looted, destroyed, or abandoned. Furthermore, healthcare facilities are overwhelmed, and other basic services, including schools, water, electricity, phone lines, and the internet, are severely limited. The potential wider threat. Meanwhile, the conflict continues to rage in South Kivu and risks engulfing the entire region, he warned. The Secretary General paid tribute to all those who have lost their lives, including peacekeepers with the UN mission in the country, MONUSCO, and regional forces. He also expressed solidarity with the Congolese people, who find themselves yet again the victims of a seemingly endless cycle of violence. There is, under that section, a link where you can learn more about the UN's work in the DRC. Silence the guns. On Friday, leaders from the Eastern African Community and the Southern African Bloc SADC will take part in a summit in Tanzania to address the crisis. Mr. Gutierrez said that the situation will also be front and center at a summit-level meeting of the African Union Peace and Security Council in Addis Ababa next week, which he will attend. As the summit in Tanzania gets underway, and as I prepared to leave for Addis Ababa, my message is clear, he told journalists. Silence the guns, stop the escalation, respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Uphold international human rights law and international humanitarian law. It is time for peace. The UN chief affirmed that there is no military solution to the crisis. He said it is time for all signatories to the Peace, Security and Cooperation Framework for the DRC and the region to honor their commitments. The 2013 document, signed by 11 countries, aimed to end the recurring cycles of conflict and violence in eastern DRC. It is time for mediation. It is time to end this crisis. It is time for peace. The stakes are too high, he said. And that is the end of the report from the 6th of February 2025. And we will now pass to the third story, the third report, which I promised you in part 3 of this mini-series, where we would follow up following the UN special meeting in Geneva on this very issue. This was published on the 7th of February 2025, the same day, later on that same day that the meeting took place. This is also found on news.un.org. 7th of February 2025, Peace and Security. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk on Friday expressed profound concerns at the ongoing violent escalation in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, caused by the ongoing Rwanda-backed M23 offensive. If nothing is done, the worst may be yet to come. for the people of the Eastern DRC, but also beyond the country's borders, he told a special session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva. Since the 26th of January 2025, nearly 3,000 people have been killed and 2,880 injured in attacks by the M23 and their allies, with heavy weapons used in populated areas and intense fighting against the armed forces of the DRC and their allies, the High Commissioner said, as UN member states weighed setting up a fact-finding mission to investigate extreme rights violations still being committed in the DRC provinces of North Kivu and South Kivu. Hostilities have continued unabated in this mineral-rich region that has been unstable for decades, amid a proliferation of armed groups forcing hundreds of thousands to flee their homes. Fighting escalated in late January when majority Tutsi M23 fighters seized control of parts of North Kivu, including areas near Goma, and advanced towards South Kivu and the eastern DRC's second city of Bukavu. A draft resolution circulated before the special session, the 37th since the council was created in 2006, also condemned Rwanda's military support of the M23 armed group and called for both Rwanda and M23 to halt their advance and to allow life-saving humanitarian access immediately. Hospitals targeted. Addressing the emergency session, Mr. Turk noted that 2 hospitals in Goma have been bombed on the 27th of January, killing and injuring multiple patients, including women and children. In a mass prison break at Munzenze Prison in Goma on the same day, at least 165 female inmates were reportedly raped, and most were later killed in a fire under suspicious circumstances, he said, citing the authorities. I am horrified by the spread of sexual violence, which has been an appalling feature of this conflict for a long time. This is likely to worsen in the current circumstances, the UN rights chief continued, adding that UN staff were now verifying multiple allegations of rape, gang rape, and sexual slavery in the eastern DRC's conflict zones. The MONUSCO role. Echoing these concerns, Bintou Keita, Special Representative of the Secretary General in the DRC and Chief of the UN Peacekeeping Mission, MONUSCO, told the Council that dead bodies still lie in the streets of Goma, which M23 fighters now control. The situation is catastrophic, she continued. While I am speaking, youth are being subjected to forced recruitments, and human rights defenders, civil society actors, and journalists have also become a major population at risk. MONUSCO continues to receive requests for individual protection from them, as well as from judicial authorities under threat and at risk of reprisals from M23 in areas under its control. She issued a stark warning on the health risks linked to the ongoing fighting, especially the resurgence of cholera and the high risk of Mpox, the sudden interruption of children's schooling, and the rise of conflict-related sexual violence and gender-based violence. According to the latest reports, medical personnel face electricity cuts and lack fuel for their generators for basic services, including morgues. Ms. Keita continued, I again call on the international community to advocate for humanitarian assistance to reach Goma immediately. Countries respond. In response to the ongoing crisis, DRC's Minister of Communications and Media, Patrick Muyaya Katembwe, spoke out against the continued logistical, military and financial support of countries, including Rwanda, to armed groups operating on our territory. The minister maintained that Rwanda's support for the M23 has fueled the violence in eastern DRC for more than 30 years, exacerbating the war for reasons linked to the exploitation of the strategic mining resources of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Dismissing that claim, Ambassador James Ngango of Rwanda to the UN in Geneva insisted that a large-scale attack against Rwanda was imminent. He accused the Kinshasa-backed coalition of stockpiling a large number of weapons and military equipment near Rwanda's border, mostly in or around Goma airport. These weapons include rockets, kamikaze drones, heavy artillery guns capable of shooting precisely within the Rwandan territory. The weapons were not turned at the theatre of operations against the M23, rather they were pointed directly at Rwanda, he said. We are all implicated. Highlighting the need for international efforts to end the long-running conflict, Mr. Turk called for a greater understanding of the political and economic background. The population in the eastern DRC is suffering terribly, while many of the products we consume or use, such as mobile phones, are created using minerals from the east of the country. We are all implicated. In response to the ongoing emergency, the Human Rights Council's 47 members adopted a resolution establishing a fact-finding mission into abuses, staffed by the UN Human Rights Office, the OHCHR, to start work as quickly as possible. A commission of inquiry will take over the fact-finding mission's work once its commissioners are appointed. OHCHR said at the outcome of the special session. I'm going to read that last full section for you again, where we are all implicated, because I think there's some very important points that have been raised. When he says we are all implicated, he is talking about not just the actors in this conflict, not just these rebel groups, not just the 100 armed groups, not just the Congolese, the Rwandan military, or the Kinshasa-backed groups. These are implications that affect everybody that has a mobile phone, that is reading or listening to this on their mobile phone right now. These mobile phone parts are made from the minerals and from the mines in the eastern DRC. That is what has caused this area to become a conflict zone. And the other thing that we should obviously be very cognizant of is that whilst it is very thankful that this meeting has convened and they have reached agreement to establish a fact-finding mission into the abuses and to start work as quickly as possible, that work has not obviously begun. The commissioners need to be appointed. An inquiry will take over the fact-finding mission. But humanitarian aid needs to get into the country. The US needs to reconsider its sanctions on US aid into the regions, and all countries, not just the member states of the UN, but all countries that buy parts, that source minerals, that source the raw mining rocks and gems and stones from quarries in this region, start to stand up and take responsibility for the consumer trade that is causing this business of human misery in Africa. So let's look at that last section again, just to drill it home. Highlighting the need for international efforts to end the long-running conflict, Mr. Turk called for greater understanding of the political and economic background. The population in the Eastern DRC is suffering terribly, while many of the products we consume or use, such as mobile phones, are created using minerals from the east of the country. We are all implicated. In response to the ongoing emergency, the Human Rights Council's 47 members adopted a resolution establishing a fact-finding mission into abuses, staffed by the UN Human Rights Office, the OHCHR, to start work as quickly as possible. A commission of inquiry will take over the fact-finding mission's work once its commissioners are appointed, OHCHR said at the outcome of the special session. And that was the end of the report from the special session of the Human Rights Council of the UN in Geneva that took place on the 7th of February 2025. Today's date is the 10th of February 2025, and where there is more information coming through, I will certainly pick up on it and make a new podcast episode to hopefully bring awareness to all of the humanitarian aid that is been able to come into the country, the protection of those two airports in Goma, so that humanitarian aid and humanitarian peacekeeping staff can access those most at risk and fly those most injured out of the country to health facilities and ensure as much protection and aid can be brought to the people suffering right this moment in Goma, in Bukavu, in the North Kivu and South Kivu provinces of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you very much for listening to this special two-part episode, which is the beginning of the next section of this mini-series called Atrocities Against People of Colour. This is Sasha Wallace. This is the Arcs and Orcs podcast. It is the 10th of February 2025. Thank you very much for listening. You can find the other parts of this collection at patreon.com/The Hero's Journey MC. patreon.com/The Hero's Journey MC. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for raising awareness. Please feel free to share this episode and the aforementioned episode, part 3, on your own social media platforms if you feel guided to. The links for these news stories will be in the description box below. Thank you.